Are you ready for the top 12?
How is this going to help me in the future?
Just how big could we get with just two people?
People are creating so much content, but quantity wasn't really a solution.
You have to be authentic. You have to be passionate about it.
Okay, let's get into it. Top 3 podcasts or books that you recommend.
So I will admit I am not a really big reader. I don't know if this is like common with creatives who specialize in video or photo, but I find myself just watching YouTube tutorials on how to edit a certain way versus reading a book. I would say 3 podcasts. I mean, this is going to sound, I'm sure this is on everyone's list, but the Joe Rogan Experience is one that I started listening to on this trip. And, we have long drives across the Nullarbor, we've been to the Outback, we spend a decent amount of time in our van. So we get after the podcast game, and Joe Rogan Experience is just one that is great. Joe Rogan, a comedian, he has all these amazing guests on his podcast, and they talk for hours and hours sometimes. And it's great. He's had a couple of politicians on there from the States. He's had, scientists, historians, actors, just everybody. So that's a breath of fresh air in terms of just what I like most about storytelling. And, it's just something that I'm a huge, huge fan of. Tuesdays with Stories is another podcast. It's with Mark Norman and Joe List. I don't know if you listen to that, but another great comedy podcast. And it's kind of the same. It's structured the same way as our podcast, where they just kind of recount everything that happened to them over the last week. But they're 2 very funny comedians. So it is. I mean, it's just so funny.
Yeah,
I
love Mark Norman. I love his stuff. So,
so
awesome.
Good.
And a 3rd podcast?
I am trying to think off the top of my head what another good one is. But I'll tell you a book that I just read. So I don't. All the Light We Cannot See. I forget who wrote it, but it's, I think, a Pulitzer Prize novel, or it won some award. I don't know, but it's a story that takes place during World War II through the eyes of 2 young kids, and it's great. It's interesting.
Definitely. There's one book. Okay, so the problem with there's a quick monologue, and then I'll get into the books. But books, especially around like consciousness raising or spirituality, or what do you want to call it? One problem is that you just keep wanting to read everything. There's so much stuff to read. So this is a book to end all books, I would say. It's called Letting Go: The Pathway to Surrender by David Hawkins, I think. That is amazing. That's a great read. The Celestine Prophecy, that's like a fun adventure. That's also really good. And then 3, no.
Any podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts?
Joe Rogan. Yeah, there's one podcast. Everyone knows Joe Rogan. I would listen to Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar.
Well, I'm actually not reading as many books as I would like to be honest, right now. I am definitely, these couple of years have been totally crazy. But I'm definitely following certain, podcasts. There is a company here in Boston that there's a lot of growth-related things that I'm following. For example, there is a company here in Boston I like a lot called Appcues. Appcues is a company that does a lot of they've kind of built this idea of the growth, the product-led growth.
So do you have a podcast about it, or?
Well, they have a really active blog, and they do all kinds of stuff that is always pretty good stuff that matters to me right now, because it's all about user onboarding, user tutorials, and product growth in general. So that's one company I would recommend. I'm keeping it kind of business oriented because that's what we talked about.
That's fine.
And then, of course, there's another company in Boston that is kind of in the same space as me called Drift. Maybe
I've heard of Drift, yeah.
So Drift, these guys are doing content like crazy. And they do have a podcast. It's a very good podcast called Seeking Wisdom that I recommend. where the CEO and the marketing guy get together and talk about, honestly, marketing and life as a whole. But very much similar to Apkus, talking a lot about growth and talking about marketing. And I don't know, when you're in this mindset, in this kind of growth mindset, I think it's nice to hear what others are doing. And these guys
Definitely. And you learn from them as well.
Yep.
I love reading autobiographies. So Nick Rebolt's a good one. Dane Swan, it's a good one. It's probably not the most informative one, but it's bloody fun read. And Pele was one that I read as a kid that I got really inspired by when I used to play soccer. So
I actually enjoy podcasts quite a bit. So I do listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast, even though it's really targeted probably people that are younger than I am. But it keeps me young. I listen to it on my bike ride.
Nice.
I do like there's a podcast that Kara Swisher does. She's a journalist who covers tech and has forever. So I'm going to have to cheat and look at my phone to see what the name of it is. Pivot. And it's Kara Swisher and Scott Galway. And they kind of cover all things tech. They get into some politics, which they probably should steer clear of. And it's entertaining. I also like The Motley Fool has a money podcast that I really enjoy. And so that would be the top three. If I throw in a fourth, there's a show called Stacking Benjamins. That is a fun, wonderful podcast in the personal finance space as well.
One that really caught me off guard because I stumbled upon it by accident. Most of the time it was just books that I would read. But a very good podcast it's called Indie Film Hustle. And it's the gentleman that does those podcasts. He's been doing it for a long time. So he has a wide range of podcasts. And the film industry is very big, so you could focus that you just want to be a writer, like a screenwriter, writing movies, or you might want to be the camera person, or you might want to be the actor, or you might want to be the distributor. So when you go to their podcast website where they have a list of all of their films, and it's probably better to go to YouTube because you can do a search on the different podcasts. You can find stuff that really just focuses you on what you want to know, and not because there's some things that people don't want to know. Some people don't want to know anything about distributing, and they just want to know about how to write a better film. And he gets some very good guests on there that are very knowledgeable, and I picked up a lot of things from those podcasts.